Are you tired of the non-stop hustle and grind? Welcome to Life in Business, the podcast for business owners who want success without sacrificing life. I'm Libby Langley, your host, award-winning no BS straight-talking business coach, Amazon best-selling author, and the queen of easy business. Join me to learn simple and practical strategies for growing your business, your profits, and your confidence, and for having fun too. Here's this week's episode. Hello, welcome to another episode of Life in Business. I am your host, Libby Langley. Oh my goodness me, today I'm going to talk to you about something so super sexy, it's going to blow your mind. We're going to talk numbers. We're going to talk numbers, we're going to talk data, we're going to talk facts. Because I firmly believe that the more facts, statistics, data, whatever you want to call it, you have behind you in your business, the more successful you're going to be. And you might not think that that's kind of all that sexy. You might not know how to kind of look at your numbers, and you might not be interested in numbers and data and all of that. But honestly, trust me, if you know some of the basics, absolutely, kind of without even thinking about it for your business, you're going to be a better business owner and you're going to be able to make better business decisions. And that's what this is all about, right? This is all about you being the best possible business owner that you can be and, making money, right? That's why we're doing this. It's not to say that you're, super motivated by money necessarily, or I don't know, driven like someone on Wall Street in the 80s or whatever. But you need to earn money. Everybody needs to earn money to pay the mortgage, pay the bills, do the nice stuff, go on holidays and all of that. And the easy option is to get a job, for sure, right? I mean, it comes with all sorts of challenges and all sorts of frustrations and difficulties. But at the end of the month, you get paid. Yeah, you get paid, you get a pension contribution, you get paid annual leave, you get paid sick pay, you might get benefits such as healthcare, private healthcare, and who knows what, I don't know, gym memberships, all sorts of things. So being self-employed, having your own business isn't the easy option. I think it's the fun option and it gets easier, right? And stuff like knowing your numbers make it easier for sure. But you have to put in the time, energy and effort to learn all this stuff. And that's why I am here. And when I work with my clients, I work one-to-one with people, helping them to be better business owners, helping to kind of cut through all the, all the nonsense that's floating around there and just give you the stuff that you need. It's utterly no fluff, no frills, the work that I do. And it's just, this is the stuff you need to know. Get better at this. You will make more money. You will be happier. You will have more time to yourself. So that's how I work with people. And one of the very, very first things that I do with almost every client is have this conversation I'm going to have with you today, is to talk about numbers, because it's really, really difficult, impossible really, for me to help anyone to take steps towards their goal without knowing where they are now, right? It's like the time I ran a marathon. Okay. So, not a runner, don't like running, not a natural athlete, don't like sport, don't like getting hot and sweaty. But I was doing parkrun. I started doing parkrun, which is 5K free run every Saturday morning around various parks in the UK and across the world. And I started doing that because some friends were doing it. And somebody said, I'm going to run the Paris Marathon. This was October. I'm going to run the Paris Marathon in April. Her and two others. Her and another, I would be the third. And I'm like, yes, that sounds like a good idea. So, if you want any ADHD impulsivity, there's an example for you. So I immediately signed up, and I do see things through when I commit to them, right? Absolutely. And so I started training. It took over my life. The two others dropped out. So I was going to do it on my own. And sure enough, I did it. And the thing is, in a marathon, just as an aside, doesn't matter if you do it in 2 hours and 1 minute or whatever the world record is, or the slowest people at the London Marathon who are in fancy dress and it takes them 4 days, you get the same medal, right? So it doesn't matter. But the point is that in order to be able to do that marathon, I needed to know my starting point. And my starting point was I could do 5K, or I just started to do 5K. I could do 5K without stopping. And so I knew I needed a plan, right? I needed a training plan, and I needed to know how I could increase my distance, not about speed, it's about distance and time on feet. But I needed to know how I could do that. And so I knew what my starting point was. Absolutely. 5K was all right. Not easy, but all right. And the end point was 42 point whatever kilometres a marathon is, 26 miles. That's quite a jump, right? But I did it. And without knowing that starting point, I couldn't have done it, because I could have just woken up in January and said, yeah, let's go run a marathon. And, done kind of 3 weeks of half-assed training and off I went. But it doesn't really work like that. And it doesn't work like that in business. I tell you that to kind of put it into language and a kind of example that you will understand. Everybody understands. Everybody knows that you can't get up and run a marathon with zero training and zero prep. And yet we get disappointed if we haven't achieved our business goals. And it's like, well, why would you achieve your business goals? Because you didn't have a clear starting point. You didn't have a step-by-step action plan to get there. And you didn't know some of the basic data, which is the numbers, right? So, profit margin. Well, first of all, let me just talk about the difference between turnover and profit. And I've talked about this in previous podcasts before, so it might be interesting for you to go back and listen to those. I'll put a link in the show notes to them. But the difference between turnover and profit is that your turnover is basically how many sales you make, how much your sales generate. And your profit is what's left after you've had or taken all your costs out. And this is one of the absolute basics of business, but it's one of the things that people just kind of don't understand. And I mean, why should you, right? We all go into business not knowing anything, and we learn an awful lot to start with. But it's this kind of misunderstanding and the disappointment that comes with that is absolutely exacerbated by those people on Instagram, particularly on social media, and they talk about, I'm consistent 10K months, 100K months, I'm on my way to 1 million. And it's like, that's your turnover. Amazing. Good for you. What profit are you making? What cash have you actually got left? And that's what matters. It doesn't matter what your turnover is, really. If you're selling your business or all stuff like this, or even buying a house, particularly there's some things that are kind of looked at in there. But ultimately, all anybody, pretty much including the taxman, cares about is your profit, is what you've got left. And that's the thing, that if you're not making any profit, you can't pay your mortgage. You can't buy food. You literally cannot eat, right? If you don't make any profit in your business, unless you then go into business debt, which we don't want to do. We don't want to talk about that. So the turnover, you need more sales, right, to increase your turnover. You need more people buying stuff from you. We understand that. And then you need to look at the costs that you have in your business. And you might think that you don't really have any costs in your business. And you might be a really low cost business. But I betcha that a lot of these people who have consistent 10K months, you understand who I'm talking about, 100K months, these people who shout about their numbers, their 7-figure businesses and all of that, I am damn sure that their costs will be extremely high. And their costs can be all sorts of things, right? Your costs can be from the very, very simple, such as paying for Zoom. Right, it's 15 quid a month or whatever it is. That's a cost to your business. And therefore, if you make, I have to do really simple maths, but if you make £150 a month and your Zoom is £15, that's like 10% of what you're making. Therefore, your profit margin is only 90%. So you can only keep the rest of it. Yeah. And then you've got other software subscriptions. You might pay for email marketing software. I pay for ConvertKit, which is absolutely brilliant email marketing software. If you fancy a free trial of that, I'll put a link in the show notes to that too. Actually, that could be really useful for you. But I pay for ConvertKit. I also pay for my Office 365. So that's another cost. Pay for things like subscriptions that you might have, pay for my accountant, a VA, travel, train travel or petrol. That's all a business cost. Could be that your car is bought through your company too, depending on what your legal setup is for the business. Cost. All of this does mean that you end up paying less tax, right? The more costs you have. But we're sort of not looking at that. We're not looking at it almost from the accounting point of view. We're looking at it from what numbers actually matter and what you need to know, okay? Fees for your bank. I have a small fee per transaction on my business bank account, and there are always fees for using Stripe, right? The payment portal that I use for my clients. So there's always bank fees. That comes off. If you have any training, if you go on any courses or any seminars, that's a cost. You might have a VA. You might have somebody who does some work for you. You might have somebody who edits your podcast like this. You might have had somebody who helps you, subcontracts. You pass some work to them to do on your behalf. It's all costs, right? And very clearly, I'm not saying this from an accounting point of view because there's some things that are tax deductible and some aren't. I'm not going into that. I'm just going into the kind of basic costs of things that affect your profit. And if you have a coach, that is a cost in the business, yeah? And a VA, did I say VA? I don't know if I just said that. But if you have a VA, you outsource work to a VA, then again, that's a cost. So there's lots and lots of different kinds of costs and lots of things that you might spend in your business, as well as your paper for your printer and your mobile phone and all that other stuff, right? There's loads of stuff. So that all needs to be included. So your profit is the number of sales you make, 10 grand a month, 1 grand a month, 100 grand a month, whatever. That's your sales. And then you minus the costs, all of those costs, which could be £15 a month for Zoom, just only Zoom, or it could be £5,000 a month because you do loads of Facebook ads and you have all sorts of suppliers and stuff helping you. So, your costs are going to vary enormously business to business. And then what's left, that's your profit, okay? And some businesses will be more profitable than others. Mine runs at a high profit margin. Mine currently is sitting at about 80%, but normally it's about 75%. That's kind of the average over the years. So mine is a high profit margin business. So that means if I make £100, £75 of it, or so, £75 to £80 on average, is what I can keep, spend, reinvest in the business, whatever. It's my money, right? But if you have a higher cost business, such as if you've got premises, you've got staff, you've got product that you need to buy, that's all going to affect your profit margin. So different industries will have different averages. So just because I tell you what mine is, it doesn't mean that that's what you need to aim for, because it might be that if you've got lots of product that you need to buy and you've got premises to store it in, for example, then 40% or 50% might be a really good profit margin for you, okay? So don't compare. It's to give you an example. But if you're in a coaching or service-based business such as mine, then yeah, absolutely, you can probably be quite a similar profit margin. And I guess, having a business where your outgoings are considerably lower, your costs are considerably lower, it ultimately means that you need fewer clients to make more money. It just means that, which gives more freedom and flexibility. Certainly when I had back in the early days of my business, so from between early 2013 to 2015, 16, I had staff and I had an office. And the cost for that was a lot. I mean, it was something like 12 grand a month that I needed to bring in just to pay for the office and the staff and all of that. And that is, that's huge. So my turnover was big, was bigger than it is now, was big back then, but the profit margin, terrible. One year, my highest turnover year, and I forget which year it was now, but maybe 2014 or something. So, I mean, ages ago, but it's all part of my business learning curve. And one of the reasons I can help you with all of this by sharing my experience, but I think it was 2014. My turnover was multiple six figures, and my profit margin was something like -3%. It was awful. It was awful. And I learned some really, really valuable lessons back then about profit, about turnover, about costs. And I made quite a lot of changes. And I went through, let's just say I went through the school of hard knocks to kind of to learn these lessons that I'm sharing with you today. But I've learned an awful lot over the years, which is why I can speak with some authority on this and know that I can help you to be better in the way that you do things. So how does this kind of impact what you're doing? Right? So if you can work all that out, you can work out what your profit margin is. That's great. Knowing the percentage is brilliant. However, it is only the starting point, because ultimately you probably want to grow your business, or you want to keep your income the same but work fewer hours, right? It's one of the two that people will come to me for my help on, for sure. So let's imagine that you want to grow your business. Now, if you want to grow your business, knowing these numbers is essential. And then you can look at kind of like the quick wins, the easier ways to grow what you're doing. And it's kind of I don't want to oversimplify it, because this is quite a complex exercise to go through, but fun. Oh, and so satisfying. But I don't want to, I'm just going to kind of oversimplify it a little bit for you, because there are two ways that you can grow your business, essentially. One is to sell more stuff, and one is to reduce your costs. I know you can do both for the exponential growth curve. But it's really simple. There's two ways of doing it. Sell more, spend less. And so you can do that exercise. You can do that exercise, and you can make a difference, and you will see growth in your business, right? And the other way is, the other kind of objective you might have is to work fewer hours. And that is simple yet complicated in the same way. So let's say you currently work pretty much 5 days a week, I don't know, 6 odd hours a day, right? A standard sort of working week, because I factored in like lunch breaks and all that stuff there, right? And say you want to get it down to 3 days, 4 hours a week. And this is exactly a client that came to me. She was not working 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. She was working pretty much constantly 7 days a week, and was kind of like super attached to her phone, and her family was moaning at her and all of this. And we worked together for a number of months, and at the end of it, she was absolutely able to work school hours 3 days a week, which gave her the freedom and flexibility to do other stuff, but also to kind of introduce new projects into her work if she wanted to, and all of this. And it was brilliant. And her income stayed pretty much the same. The goal wasn't to grow the business in that regard. The goal was to realign her life, which, kind of is really what it's all about, right? It's the reason that we have our own businesses, to have this kind of freedom. So if that's your goal, there's more things to look at. Yes, you need to look at the costs, for sure. So exactly the same as if you want to grow your business, you need to look at your costs and see where you can save money, because if you save money, you don't need to get as many clients or work as hard, because you're not spending as much out. But there are other questions to kind of ask yourself. Is like, is your business actually going to make any money? Yeah. If you're working as much as you're working because you need to do that to kind of just keep the turnover ticking over to satisfy the costs, your business isn't making money. So you can't reduce what you're doing, because then you won't be able to keep up with the costs, and you ultimately will just lose your house, right? So can you actually make money in your business? And this is a case of looking at your pricing and looking at your expenditure. And then what do you need to change in order to be able to kind of really have this income cost balanced? Yeah. So really, is your goal achievable? And for this client that I worked with, the answer was yes, because we streamlined a lot of things. That was really what we did. We streamlined a lot of processes that she had in her business, and we stopped her over delivering. So we put some really strict boundaries in place. She outsourced more. She had a remote team and she outsourced more, which freed her up. And because the service was much more streamlined, the profit was about the same. Yeah. And it just became more of a sustainable business model, which was brilliant. And she could trust other people and take her foot off the gas a bit, which was great. I had another client who came to me wanting to grow her business, be better at business. And what actually happened, we worked together for 3 months. And what actually happened at the end of it was that she made a conscious choice to get a job. And whilst you might think, oh, well, you didn't help her to grow your business. It's like, yeah, but she made the conscious choice that was right for her. And the reason that she did that was because one of the first things I said to her, and it's just so hard to say this, but sometimes you've just got to kind of just say it. She was never going to make any money with the business the way it was, because when we'd done this cost exercise, she was losing money. And her fear was that there was a kind of expected cost for the services that she was offering. She was offering classes to people. There was an expected cost for that, cost limit for that. And if it was more, people wouldn't pay it because there's competition and all of that. And I don't believe that that's necessarily true, right? Because, there are loads of cars on the road. They're all just cars. They all just get you from A to B. But you can buy a banged up clapped out old banger for like $1,000, or you can spend, I don't know, how much is the most expensive car? Some custom-made something is probably over $1 million. And there's everything in between. So there is a market for everything, okay? So that's an aside, but it's also very true. You can just charge what you want to charge. But she hadn't factored in her costs for stuff. She knew what her turnover was, so she knew what she brought in. But she hadn't factored in the petrol, the time, the equipment, the room hire, all of this stuff. And it just wasn't going to be a profitable business. Now, we could have made it a profitable business. We could have made lots of changes to it. But as a result of us talking it through and working together, she actually got a gig in a school and doing what she was doing, and then they ended up offering her a job. So it's amazing. So everybody was happy, and it was really super. But it was really interesting to work with someone who made the conscious decision to do something different. And I think that's really, really brave and really commendable. And that, that could happen for all of us. Okay, we get to the point where we decide, I want to do something different now, and there's never any shame in that. But she was only able to do that as a positive thing and a conscious thing because she'd been through this exercise, because she knew what her numbers were. And if she hadn't have done that, she might have still ended up getting a job, even the same job, but it would have been done in a different state of mind. It would have been done in I can't make my business work, I'm going to get a job. That sort of defeatist, negative way. But because she did know her numbers and she did know where the business was going and she did know what she made and what it cost her and all of that, she was able to say, do you know what? This is not right for me. I'm going to choose the other option. Brilliant. But can you see how these numbers are kind of everything? And I do think that makes them pretty sexy, because they are absolutely the kind of basis, the foundations for a really successful business. And if I asked you, what's your profit margin? I'm sure that a high proportion of you couldn't tell me. And that's exactly what I can help you with. And I would love to be able to help you with that. And I think that just getting to grips with that alone will change your business forever, and certainly your mindset, and make you a more confident business owner. So what I suggest to you is have a go at this, but also book in for a 30-minute mini strategy session with me. Book in for a 30-minute mini strategy session with me, and we'll go through it all. So you can bring what you know, and also what you don't know, questions that you've got. And I can help you get clarity on this. Absolutely get so you feel confident and so that you know these numbers. And so that I can say to you, what's your profit margin? You could say, boom, 30%, but I want it to be 80% or wherever you are. And then that's something that, longer term we could look at or whatever. But the 30-minute strategy session with me is absolutely something that will push you forward and give you this confidence, give you this clarity, give you this focus, and give you this direction for what you need to work on. Because without the clarity and direction, you could be working really, really hard, kind of on the wrong thing. And I hate that because it's just such a waste of time. And time's precious and energy is limited, particularly when you're over 40, you start to get a bit older, and that all needs to be protected, right? That's the reason that you're in business, I'm in business, is to be able to have this flexible and fluid life. And I want to help you protect that. So I'm putting a link in the show notes. There's a link in the show notes to book yourself a 30-minute strategy session. Oh, that word, strategy. I just can't say it properly. 30-minute strategy session with me by Zoom, date and time of your choice. I'll put that in the notes, but I promise you it will make an enormous difference to you and to your business. And that's what I really care about. That's my mission in life, is to make you a better business owner. Fantastic. So go get your calculator out, go look at your spreadsheets and your finance software, or the receipts in a bag, however you do it, and book yourself in with a session, and I will speak to you next week. See you soon. Lots of love. Thank you for listening to Life in Business. Please make sure that you subscribe or follow so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's show, please leave a review, as it helps others to find the podcast and spread the word that there's an easier way to do business. If you want to chat with me about today's episode or suggest a topic for the future, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram @Libby Langley. See you next week.